I don't know about you guys, but I'm riding so high right now. The weather's been absolutely brilliant. A non-Victorian team won the premiership, and my boys won Bathurst and made me cry happy tears this time. So, let's launch into the player review. We've done the teams, now it's time to review player stat performances. Now, you guys know that I love my total value above replacement player metric, and that's what we'll be using for a large portion, but this year we're doing things a bit differently. The overall top 40, I'm not just going to read that out to you. I decided to do that with the Stat Chat boys in the form of a quiz. Go check that out if you haven't already, because that was so much fun to do. I'm hoping that we can do something very similar in the future, and I'd like to make that a yearly thing. Let me know if you'd like to see more VORP quizzes with those lads, because it'll help me convince them. They don't need convincing. Yeah, so let me know if you'd love to see those. But anyway, today's not about that. Today is about the other weird things that I've pulled up in my stats viewing things. I've lost my place in my script, so I'm just rambling, so let's just move on to it. Let's start with each side's best players. Predictably, Adelaide's strengths lay in its forward half, with 6 of the top 10 player seasons for them coming goal side of centre. Dawson is the sole midfielder in the 10, aside from Isaac, the next non-Rankin player being Jim Bob Peatling in 13th. Fogarty had a disappointing return after a promising start in terms of his overall contributions, but in terms of just forward-line contributions, he was 21st in the league, which is promising. Dan Curtin had a positive T-VORP, which is incredible for a first-year midfielder. Not even Harley Reid could do that, but then again, Curtin was very versatile, which my formulas love. Draper, thanks to the sub-rule, had one of the very worst seasons I've ever seen in 10 games or more, while my Irish king, Mark Keane, had the best season of his career. Love to see it, even if he spoon-fed the ball to the opposition on our own 50 multiple times per game. But you live by the Keane, you die by the Keane, and we died by it. Brisbane were exceptional. The only players to play half the season and even get under 1.5 T-VORP were Day, who's retired, Starcevic, who's leaving to go to AFL club that's basically a hole in the ground, and Bruce, who's classed as a midfielder on the AFL website, which just doesn't seem right, but I'm forced to go with it. He's better than the number that he was given. Their young guns in Gallup and Levi had superb debut seasons. Logan Morris did very well, and that backline was amazing, with so many backmen in the line's top 10. The loss of Archie will suck, yes, especially with Charlie having his worst season in a long time, but Allen helps that so much, whilst Draper will cure the awful ruck core that, while they got the tap numbers, especially in the grand final, do not do shit around the ground. Carlton, oh boy, Jack Silvani was their best player, emphasis on the was there. This season was so bad that it ended the Silvani association with the club that's older than my parents. Sarah and Hewitt did well. Haynes had a nice season, but then it's a big drop-off. Cripps had similar value to Ned Long. Kerno pulled Wayne Miller numbers. Good to see that we finally win that draft battle, excluding all the years that came before. Sard did next to nothing. Pitternet showed he's still not ready to be a number 1 ruck now that TDK is insisting on sharing locker rooms with Jack Silvani. And a whopping 15 Blues found themselves in the minuses, with Blake Acres in particular deep in the red. However, Matthew Cottrell proved to be a pretty promising sort of player coming through. I will say the Hollands were very disappointing, as proven by one of them being delisted. I don't know which one, I still can't tell them apart. But yeah, just really not a good season overall in terms of team value or player value for Carlton. The Pies had an odd one. A couple of standouts in Schultz, Cameron and Nick Dacos that somehow polls huge Brownlow numbers, despite stats that suggest he's on the same level as most other blue chip mids. Then the Evergreen Pendles, who rocked a 4.5 T-VORP despite playing 30 seconds of the prelim. Darcy Moore and Maynard did great things down back, Moore actually preventing the most theoretical points in one-on-ones all year, which we will get to later on. And then the drop. A lot of Pies, 6 to be exact, find themselves in the 1 to -1 pure average range. DeGoey had a disaster, WHE appears spent, and Allen had a poor one. But if they can keep that small forward core of McCreary, Elliott and Lipinski rolling, who all got 2.9 T-VORPs or higher, in addition to Lockie, they still could be exciting next year. 41 players played 4 games or more to register numbers countable to team-weighted stats for the Bombers. You want to know how many of those got so much as 1 T-VORP? 12. 12. 2 of those guys played 5 or less games. Outside of Martin, Caldwell, Merritt and maybe Wright, the Dons had nothing. Even the guys who played the whole year were awful. McGrath, Dersma, Gresham, Pryor. These guys have shown that they can be handy players, but all were almost exactly average. The rest were mainly just awful. Shout out to Kako, who did well to get an above-average T-ball in a Rising Star eligible year, something that Levi didn't do. But this is just tragic to look at. Assuming I'm looking in the right direction in the edit. Look after me in the future editing me.
Terrible mess. Apparently he's dead. So, bad luck there.
Look at Dylan Shiel. This guy was supposed to be a Brownlow contender. Now he's the very definition of middle of the road. Once Merritt and Draper go, this side is fucked. Fremantle used precious few players more than 3 times, and it's a weird mix. There's a variety of positions in the top 10, with the top 3 obviously being the big 3. Switkowski and Clark did very, very well. Frederick had a great season, but then we have to touch on the midfield. Young had good numbers despite his injuries. Wagner was about average. Johnson had moments, but 4 of the bottom 6 were midfielders for Fremantle, with the 7th being an underdone Sean Darcy. And sadly, bottom of those 4, and indeed the entire AFL, was a man who used to be its absolute best player. Nat Fyfe, minus 9.43. Absolutely tragic. Geelong's top contributors were dominated by small forwards and midfielders who were able to generate high amounts of midfield entries and scoring, and who were defensively responsible. Manor, Myers, Holmes, Atkins, Dangerfield and Martin even all fit into that archetype. I was not expecting Jack Martin to do so well, with Cameron doing great things and Smith doing enough to offset being about as efficient as a Humvee with 4 flat tyres. The defence, though, was also amazing. Damn it. Only Duncan and Mullen rated lower than -1, with Mullen being one of those Jed Buse role player types who T-Ball can't really process because his only purpose is to nullify a man to the detriment of his own game. But remember how the Dons had, 11 guys over 1 T-Ball that really actually counted? Geelong had 13 over 3. That's a team, alright. Rowell, Anderson, Took. Easy top 3, but the gap between them and 4th was not as cavernous this year as it has been previously, with Bailey Humphrey, Joel Jeffrey and Sam Collins also hitting 4 or more. 20 players registered a positive T-VORP, which only just includes Ben King, whose lack of impact further up the ground than direct shots for goal hurts him here, and his fellow forwards didn't help. The Suns had more forwards under -1 T-VORP than over 1, which isn't good. But if they get Curnow, I don't think they'll mind. Man, I wrote this script a couple of weeks ago. Holy hell. They didn't get Curnow, but I still think they'll be alright. The Giants had an even spread of contributors, their top 5 all spread by 0.6 of a standard deviation, all in the top 43 players league-wide, and all with 20 games played. A further 4 registered 4 or more, which is good, mostly defenders, including Ash, Buckley and the Hindenburg. The bottom of their bucket, though, was also fairly shallow. Joe Fonte, the only guy below -3 who played half the season, and even then, not by much. Briggs had a poor one, though. Kelly was disappointing, and Stringer has fallen from grace somewhat, but Cadman and Riccardi did fantastically and will continue to improve. Very, very promising signs for the future up front for the Giants. The Hawks had the most players in the positives, but Jack Gunston was the only player besides a permanently injured Will Day to break even remotely close to the top 40. Sicily dropped from an elite 2024 to a merely very good 2025. Jack Ginnivan registered an impressive 4.1, which I didn't see coming. A whole host of guys sit between the 2 and the 4 brackets, which generally constitutes a pretty good season, but not all Australian calibre, that's more 5 or more. And even Luke Bruce's obvious final season was only a -1.5, which is fairly decent considering. The less said about Bailey McDonald, the better, though, and there was a few of those role players who didn't really light the world on fire, but still, this, wherever it is, here or here, very good list. Well done. Max Gawn, then daylight. Almost literally, actually. Gawn's ruck leading 9.6 T-VORP now led a Gold Coast-bound Petrarca some 33% back. Pickett's sticking around, but 4th place may... I don't think he... Did he leave? I think he's still there, but God, he's not in spirit, is he? And besides Cade Chandler, that's pretty much it. Oliver had similar value to Trent Rivers, and the D's had 6 blokes, either under -4 or bordering so close to the mark that it makes no difference, most of which being forwards. Very, very grim. And Harry Petty, you got lucky. Great positional change, mate. You're more versatile now, but you are not a key forward. Pack that shit in. Stay down back or whatever the hell you did this year. Very unsurprisingly, North struggled to get anyone close to the top 40. Jai Simpkins' forward player season led all comers, once Sheasel's forward player season gets nixed because no goddamn forward gets 54 touches in a game. His midfield season sits 4th behind X and Curtis, and just ahead of Larkey and LDU before a massive chasm to a bunch of their mids who did okay but not exceptionally. Jack Darling and Caleb Daniel were pretty much bang average. Constanti got a lot of flack throughout the season, and his -1.6 sort of justifies that. McKercher and O'Sullivan had similar seasons as they struggled to adjust to AFL level, and Zane Dersma did little to get any external attention on a potential trade move, with a -3.8 T-Vault from 10 games. Also, what the hell happened to Bailey Scott? Butter's one-man army act netted him a deserved top 40 appearance, although Rosie's switch to defence also produced good numbers, but no one filled that gap that Connor left. Wines did his usual hanging around the fringes of the top 100. Boak spent more time forward and was good when he did so. JHF missed a lot of footy and wasn't terrific when he was playing. Drew was a letdown and Mead was a liability. Also, the highest rated port forward to not miss a third of the season was Darcy Byrne-Jones, which is never a good sign. NG had an okay season, but needed to have a great one to offset Luco and Finlayson's injury-riddled and unproductive seasons. Port had 18 players with negative T-Vaults, exactly half the side, which shows that they were pretty much average. Except, do you want to know which club had one less player with a minus in front of their score? North Melbourne. Oh dear. Richmond also had 18 minuses, but unlike Port, no one did anything positive. Jack Ross's 5.283 was the lowest total of any club leader, and yes, that includes West Coast. Boston had a lovely season, but not on the level of All-Australian, and Keyback sort of had a bit of trouble this year, which I'll explain later in terms of getting high scores. Ben Miller once again did very well and may prove to be a star of the future, but it falls off badly from there. Sam Lawler, actually I should say Layla, I don't like the pronunciation of Lawler because it doesn't... Sam Lawler, in his first season, showed his talent by being the 4th best Tiger and the best first-year player, but led a middling group. We've got a lot of guys who've played football deep in negative territory, as expected for a young side, but Steely Green, Hugo Ralph-Smith and James Tresize all had massive reputation bruisings in particular. Tyler Sonsi was lucky not to play one more game, or he'd have been eligible for one of the red squares in the StatChat video, while Caleb Smith produced next to nothing in his 8 appearances. The whole side pretty much just awful from start to finish in terms of this sort of value contribution. St Kilda are in a weird place, what with their skipper deciding to step down, but the Jack that they kept in Sinclair did top their list, while 4th place Marshall had both feet, arms and most of his head outside the door, but still managed to stick around at the Saints. However, bringing in Silvani and TDK covers a lot of gaps in some senses, and they got shockingly good production out of Hall, Sharman and Wood. Wilkie had a good season, Nasiah was ridiculous, but an early season slump impacted his ratings, that's why he's not so high. And if there's any doubt of the power of St Kilda's Jacks, everyone to have played 4 games or more featured in their top 13 players. And if you add Silvani to that, that's 5 of their top 14. I love that so much. At the bottom, Toby Travaglia had an absolute nightmare on 6.14 from 12, and that's negative 6.14. Collard got calmer for his slur-happy ways with, I think, what, a -4.5 or something, I don't really care. Jones, well, very much looked like he's done. He's retired ever since I wrote this script. And Boxall surprisingly put up very poor numbers despite passing the eye test, going to show you that you can have good games, yes, but you need to have a consistent season in a lot of areas to truly satisfy T-Vault. Sydney were a 3.5-man band with Blakey, Grundy, Heaney and an injured Mills, Kel's Surprise, well ahead of the rest. Goulden just couldn't get any consistency with his body in all sorts, whilst Justin and James filled in okay, but they once again got nothing up front. Hayden McLean was their only forward who played half the season above 1 TVORP, with Campbell being the only one in the positives aside from him. Hamling is rapidly making a case to be the worst active premiership player, whilst Jordan led a similar campaign himself. Ollie Florent went backward at a rate of knots and went backward out the arse of the club, now at Carlton. Sorry for that, Ollie. Peter Laddams has no place on this list, and they only had 4 backmen total register positive TVORPs. There is a lot of work to do in the Harbour City. Yep, as you'd expect, this is a disaster zone. Graham leads all comers for the Eagles in TVORP and homophobic slurs, so really good to see his all-round game improving, with McGovern ruining TVORP for all key defenders by playing well and then being forced into premature retirement. Then it's a cliff to McCarthy and Barker, who have half the TVORP of Graham. You've got 3 Liams in a row there, that's kind of nice, but you also have 22 guys, a full starting lineup minus a sub, in the negatives, including 10 blokes beyond -3, which includes Premiership player Jaden Hunt on -5.2. This is awful. Look at it. Oh, and Oscar Allen, one of 13 Eagles to register 1 or higher, is leaving for a concussion-addled Starcevic, whose awful TVORP of -3.1 only puts him 10th worst at this nightmare of a club. Send help. The Dogs had the best per-player figure as a team, and it really shows why here. Their midfield are on a different level. They had 4 of the top 8 players overall, whilst Darcy also chipped in at 2nd overall. First, by the way, just a Marcus Bontempelli, who has the most TVORP and MVORP ever recorded in a season, and it's not all that close to 2nd. Plus, you have Norton, Fraser, Treloar and Kennedy and Bailey Dale all hit 5 or more, with Dale the only one not to make it to the top 50 out of all of those players, and he only just missed out. 17 players had TVORPs over 2. No one does that. In fact, no Dog had a TVORP of between 1.5 and 0. Everyone was either great or just below average, which sums up their season perfectly, really, doesn't it? Even their negative players were still amazing relatively, with 8 players in the 0 to -1 band, which is still in the average, not poor range. Yes, Arthur Jones stunk it up again, and because of his dual position nature is counted twice, and yes, DA and Jones are so far done it's not funny, and Harvey Gallagher is perhaps the most useless footballer I saw all season, and Josh Dolan somehow resided in the top scoring forward line for 11 games and nearly fell to a -6, but overall these are just insane numbers as a team. How the hell did they miss September? Oh yeah, their backline shit. Easy solve. But that's TVORP, which tells a whole story, but not the whole story. What if you're only interested in the players' contributions to their own positional subset? Well, let's take a look. It might surprise you. Actually, if you take a look at our key forwards, they will not surprise you. You'll find the big triple towers of Thilthorpe, Darcy and Cameron dominate positionally and overall, with Gunston very nearly taking the positional crown at the age of, 53. Cooper Trembath and Jordan Croft sneak in here with small cameos. Taylor Walker makes the top 10 thanks to his high assist numbers. Ben King sits very low down thanks to limited impact outside of pure scoring. And our top 20 is rounded out by Logan Morris and Darcy Fogarty coming in at 21st, because I, in this list, accidentally kept Jordan Croft because I decided not to do a games limitation until other positions. So thanks, Jordan. Anyway, it's not really that much of an even spread. The Crows, Giants, Dogs, Cats and even North chipping in for multiple entrants. The general forwards field, however, was simply dominated by the Cats. Manor and Myers took the top 2 spots, Manor by a cantering distance. Adam Treloar showed what could have been, whilst Paul Curtis showed how outrageous his All-Australian and 22 under-22 team snubs were with a terrific season. The Pies chip in with a couple of players, Elliott and the much-maligned Schultz, whilst Geelong chip in 3 more entrants in Danger, Stengel and, most surprisingly, Jack Martin. Kai Pickett sits low but had good overall contributions, whilst Riley West and Max Hall close out our top 20 in breakout seasons. The mids, well, wasn't all that close. Marcus Bontempelli finished an insane 0.7 standard deviations above 2nd place, that being his teammate and a man who was lucky to claim the best and fairest crown ahead of him. Libba sits 5th in a midfield that I can't believe didn't make finals. A smattering of Geelong and Gold Coast mids are in the top 20, of course, and the Freo duo is right next to each other here, Brayshaw's greater forward contributions making up the TVORP difference, with Hewitt and Caldwell rounding out the top 20. You can see how TVORP really really makes a difference to positional vault. Like Matt Kennedy is the 26th best midfielder by MVault, but thanks to chipping in 9 points per game above a replacement player, which is top 10 for midfielders, as well as solid contributions defensively, of course, he gets into the top 50 overall in T-Vault. The ruck battle wasn't close. Gawn shattered and in a bit of a shock, English came home an easy second despite average ruck efficiency. His marking, scoring and tackling helped to make up that difference. There's very few surprises as we progress, aside from Matt Flynn beating out Pitternet, Darcy and a host of others. Good on him. I thought he was a nice guy when he was at the Giants. He was the first player whose autograph I got when I was over in Sydney, so that's Matt Flynn, you're a cool dude. I don't think you're a great player, but you're a cool dude. Jerry's also really low because he doesn't mark the ball often, doesn't inject the ball into his attacking 50, and isn't a part of many scoring chains, so that's why he's not anywhere near the top 40. And the worst ruck to play any sort of games at all, Bailey J. Williams again. Tom Stewart coasted in state prize for general defenders, no shock, with Ryan and Vlosten taking up familiar positions on the podium. Sicily did well, Worrell was in the top 6 and not far off the pack. Boddy Hewland's up there, which is really cool, as is Ruben Jinby, a huge career resurgence for the big fella. GWS don't dominate this category as much as I'd expect, but still have 4 guys in the top 20, while Blakey's been forced to improve his defensive accountability now that the ball's down his end more often, getting into the top 20 defenders on merit before registering the second best F-VORP of any general defender to soar up the T-VORP list. So at least he's not a liability back there now, but he's still got work to do. Finally, key backs, and this is where it breaks. 4 of the top 5 slots were taken by players who played 6 games or less, had great performances, and then just went away. Jed Adams, despite recording 27 fantasy points, had a DVOLP of 1.98, thanks to a 100% disposal efficiency, and most tellingly, 4 one-on-ones, which he won every single one of, as did the other 2 guys who played 3 or less who were in the top 4, albeit the other 2 won less one-on-ones. This lowered DVOLPs across the board in the position, explaining why so few key backs were in the top 40 this year, but of the ones who played actual amounts of games, Andrews led the GWS duo of Taylor and Buckley by a long way, which I don't think surprises anyone. Some interesting names pop up, but again, so many of them fall short of the 17-game limit for the top 40. Wilkie had the 5th highest T-VOLP of any key back to hit that mark, but was only 13th highest overall, which shows you just how little key backs played this season. Mark Keane missed the top 20 altogether, largely thanks to 3.4 clangers per game, which leads all key backs, with Connor O'Sullivan, the unlucky one in 21st. And just quietly, what a season he had. Almost completely unremarkably, but T-VOLP shows, I'll get to him later, but T-VOLP shows he could have won the Rising Star. So, just some quick stats before we go. O'Sheen Mullen, despite being my second least valuable player over 16 games, was the 13th most attacking player relative to their position, thanks to a high percentage of his very few disposals going towards scoring chains and those goals that he got in the final series, which came out of nowhere. Messiah leads that category, to no one's surprise, with some interesting names up there. SDK, Baker and Dan Turner joining obvious candidates like Track, Darcy and Thilthorpe in the top 15. Defensively, relative to position, Graham leads as a defensive forward, with Allen oddly in second. In a list owned by forwards, Fraser shows why he was a top 40 in T-VORP, Myers shows why he was top 10, and some fun names like Jack Ross, Buku Karmas and Jake Riccardi show up. Theoretical points saved, which extrapolates defensive one-on-ones into saved marking contests in front of goal, shows Darcy Moore as the leader, theoretically saving 13.3 points per game. Taylor and Buckley, as usual, put in good showings, as does a shock 3rd place from Asava Ratagalia. Mac Andrews up there, of course. Andrews is lower than you'd expect, but it's a tight race. Murray's in there too, get in, as is Tom McDonald and Brandon Zirk Thatcher. Guess the ball's been down there a bunch this year, eh, Cam? I was also going to touch on WAR, or wins above replacement. It's a metric that I've really tried to get right, but I'm still yet to get the formula where I want it to be. At the moment, it's spitting out Alia in second because Port had the lowest points per win, so it's easier to look like a hero in that squad. Regardless, Isaac Heaney leads, being worth 0.234 wins above replacement in a season, which doesn't sound like much, and quite frankly, it isn't. In baseball, it'd be about equivalent to a 1.65 WAR season, which is fairly average. I'll have to play around with the weighting somewhat, but Anyway, other names in the top 15, if you're interested, include more Port guys, the Bont, Jack Gunston, Jacob Wiedering, and Sam Taylor. Defenders get a good rap as they've got higher weightings because it's all about points generated. Ben King, unsurprisingly, leads points per disposal, averaging a goal every 2 touches. Bont is responsible for more points created than any other player, with his teammates in 2nd, 5th, and 6th, and 10th, and 14th. Jeez, good on you, Riley. Then we've got some other cool things. Here's the players who fell the most VORP positions this year. A lot of injury-affected seasons and a few bombers on there, actually. Lukosius tops this list to very little surprise. After a great 2024, he just couldn't get on the park until late in 25 and struggled to impact games. Who else have we got? Dan Houston's the main one who kind of did it to himself. Top 30 last year, but merely slightly above average this year. Charlie Curnow, to my delight, is on this list, and Hayden Young is as well, to my chagrin. They're the only other members of last year's top 40 to fall at least 150 places. Minimum games played for consideration, by the way, for this list and the improvers list is 5. So at the other end of the scale, Matty Cottrell had a great season with Cripps underperforming and Kennedy out the door, jumping an insane 469 positions. Nice. Williams and Evans join him in the top 20 risers at Carlton, with Curtis, Humphrey, Cadman and Gunston highlighting a great year for young forwards. There's the Gunston is young actually, but he's really old joke there for you. Hope you enjoyed that. Dan Curtin showed his rising star performance was merited, jumping 300 spots. Callahan, Bailey, Jackson and Schultz, who were all top 40 players for VORP this year, discounting games limits, were just outside the top 20 improvers, but all jumped over 200 spots. Now, let's look at the All-Australian team. I decided to see how valid the selection of the team was. Here's the selected 22, and you can see that many of these picks are great. 18 of these players are in the top 40 in T-VORP, which is very encouraging. 3 more are within the top 65 with a minimum T-VORP of 4.9, which is absolutely All-Australian calibre, even if Dale is an average defender at best. Then we get to the elephant in the corner. Josh Battle, derided by everyone as a pick with good reason. He has a P-VORP only higher than Dale and nowhere near the attacking chops to make up for it. A player ranked 147th has no business being in the All-Australian 22, but hey, it was a bad year for key backs. Maybe there were no other options. Well, if I just disappear from the screen like I'm in Avengers Infinity War for a second and get the second team up, here's the 22 that missed the All-Australian squad. Let's see if we can find a better player than Battle. And looking at this squad, let's get the obvious ones out of the way. There was no way they were going to select 2 Bulldogs who missed over a month, even though both deserved to be picked. Max Holmes missing was a joke. Rankin would have made it if not for his bigotry, and generally these selections are pretty bang on as well. But one thing you will notice is that if you combined all of these players onto one list, Battle has a worse T-VORP than everyone except NG and the 2 Gold Coast Halls. King only kicked goals and did fuck all else, that's why he's so low. Either one of Nick Vlosten or Josh Worrell, or even Cal Wilkie, who for the record had a 4.94 T-VORP, slotting him between Ash and Vlosten, would have been perfectly acceptable. Battle is the worst All-Australian call of the decade, and I'm including DBJ and Cameron being the captain despite Gawn, Dawson and Andrews all being in the 22 and skippers at their club on that list. But I do have to say, all in all, the 44 was almost perfect. 37 of the 44 were in the top 100 players by T-VORP, with Elliott, Keane and Long having good excuses to be listed in the 44 regardless. So who got snubbed? These are my top 22 players who didn't feature in the All-Australian Selection 44 extended squad thing. And look, I can understand the top 4 here. They excelled in stat categories in particular that I think are important, which shot them up the ranks. Stewart, though, I feel was absolutely snubbed. The rest, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over those, I don't think. Worrell, though, that might haunt me forever, since I would have looked like Nostra fucking Damus at the start of the season, but anyway. And that's it. Who was your standout performer of the year? Is there a player you'd like to know the detailed VORP numbers of? Let me know in the comments. And Patreon members, I'm sorry that this one wasn't an early release for you guys, but you will be getting access to my full VORP spreadsheet to have a look around at, and maybe a sketch that I was going to do for this video, but just totally ran out of time. Anyway, I've been the GAZ-man and will continue to be so. Catch you next time. I hate doing this, but it's just become, like, default at this point. Send help.